Hello, my name is Brooke Anderson, and I'm here to present about being knowledge-driven, not data-driven. And the reason why I like to talk about being data-driven is because I am a data scientist. I work with Jordan School District. I was a classroom teacher for 15 years, taught English language arts and computer applications, then went back to school, got a master's degree in information systems with an emphasis in data science. And now I am elbow deep in data all day, but I also get to work with teachers and administrators and other educators, helping them interpret the data and know what to do with it. So it's the best of both worlds, being a teacher and being a data scientist. One of the things that has really guided me in this long journey out of the classroom and into data science has been this quote from W. Edwards Deming, one of my favorite thinkers. And he said, "It is not enough to do your best. You must know what to do, and then do your best." And this really speaks to me in education, because there's so many unknowns in what we do. Education, I think, is the most complex undertaking that we can endeavor to be good at. It's certainly the most complex system that we're dealing with at a state or local level. There's a lot involved. And a lot of that depends on us knowing what to do before we can do our best. So I'm going to change that a little bit to say, I know we hear about being data-driven, but I want to tell you it is not enough to be data-driven. You have to know what to do, and then you can be data-driven. And I even don't like the term data-driven. I would probably say data-informed. You have to know what to do and then be data-informed. Because we have all kinds of data, but it can't really drive us anywhere if we don't know what it means. So here's how I would classify the difference in my own mind. Knowledge-driven means that I understand the process of learning, skill X, Y, or Z, and I can therefore select relevant data about that process. I would see data-driven as being more, I'm going to make strategic decisions based on data analysis interpretation. I just get data, and then I can just tell what I need to do next from the data. Which sometimes can happen, it's nice. But I really need to know what I'm looking at in order for that to be true. And it's not always true that we understand the data that we're looking at. In fact, I would say we are often, as educators, given data that we don't know what it means. So Acadiance reading has been something that a lot of us have learned a lot about in the last 10 years. And Acadiance reading tells us that 67% of grades 1 through 3 students in Utah met reading benchmarks. Well, hooray. How are we going to use that to make decisions if we don't know what at benchmark means? We would have to know first. We actually get a lot of data from measurements like Acadiance reading. We get data about, can students recognize sounds? Can they name letters? Can they read correct sounds? Can they segment words? We can even track how many errors they make in a minute. For every student in the state, we can get this data in grades 1 through 3. Does it drive us anywhere in particular? Not without understanding the process by which students gain these skills. The only thing data can do, if we don't understand it, is just tell us, hey, more students need to do that. Go do more. Get higher numbers. But how? That's a knowledge question. So when I talk about being knowledge-driven, and we're handed Acadiance reading data, I would say a knowledge-driven approach is we need to understand the process of learning to read, especially the process of recognizing and producing CVC, consonant, vowel, consonant, words automatically. And then if I understand that process, I can select data that is relevant to that process and track that. But here's an approach that I see all too often, and that concerns me, and it's labeled as data-driven, and I don't think it should be. What I often see is when people get together to talk about data, they say, we need to analyze this data more often. We just need to find out which teacher has best scores, which teacher has the best, because they must know something, We just need to be like that teacher. If your approach is just find out who has the best scores and then do what they do, that means you don't know the learning process. Because the process of teaching isn't just being like Miss Jones across the hall. The process is building student skills. So you have to build knowledge before you can really use that data. And without that kind of background knowledge, data analysis can be demoralizing. If you've been in a PLC where someone else had better scores than you and was like, hey, everyone be like this person, it's pretty demoralizing. It can be confusing. Well, how do I be like that person? You have really cute bulletin boards. Are you going off Pinterest or I don't know? It can also just be unhelpful because you could waste a lot of your time trying to figure out what's the magic sauce that this other person has, when really it's not magic sauce. It is a learning process that students can go through. So when you're handed data, and this is just something that I've seen in my experience, almost all of those experiences are going to result in finding out a knowledge gap, something you don't know. All right, we just got all this data back about, elementary math. We'll say that so many of our students can't multiply with automaticity by the end of 3rd grade, single numbers. Well, what do I do with that? Do I understand how students get to the point where they can do that with automaticity? Do I understand that process? That's my knowledge gap. And the data isn't helpful until I learn about that process, until I fill that knowledge gap. If I just keep testing students on their fluency in their math facts without learning more about that process, I just get more data, I get more numbers about how they're doing. Doesn't necessarily help me teach any better, doesn't help me understand what they need any better. So more data does not fill a knowledge gap. Only going deep and learning more about that process of student learning can fill that gap. So a knowledge-driven approach would be to focus on what does student learning look like? How do I know when students know this versus when they don't? What does proficiency look like? What are the effective teaching strategies that get students to that point? How will I know they're effective? Those are the questions that a knowledge-driven approach would take. A data-driven approach is simply, how many students can do this now? How about now? How about now? What's the improvement? So again, we want to start with knowledge and then be informed by data. Data analysis, where you know what to look for, at least in my experience, feels awesome. When you know exactly what you want to see from your students and then you see it, is there anything more empowering as a teacher to be like, yes, that was exactly it. They did it. It's very satisfying to be able to see that students have engaged in that learning process and come out the other side actually knowing the thing you wanted them to know. And that comes from your knowledge as a teacher. So, what I'll say is quality instruction cannot be delegated to data. It comes from you as the teacher and your knowledge. And what we really need, anytime we're looking to improve, we need deeper knowledge. Not necessarily more data, although more data might come with that, but we need deeper knowledge in order to improve. So this is really important because we're often asked to make choices about how we spend our time, how we spend our money. And when we're faced with a choice of how to spend time and money, my recommendation as a data scientist, build knowledge. You can find a way to be informed by data, that's great. But when you see a knowledge gap, build knowledge first. And then you'll know what data to look at. Thanks so much for your time. My name is Brooke Anderson. You can follow me on Twitter at Anderbrook, where hopefully I will start again talking about education data and all things education data. But I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.